one of the verses that the Lord really quickened to me, or just moving into the whole story, in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and 1 Chronicles 13. If you want to turn there, these are just really key, because in the time of the judges, in the time of Eli, the children of Israel trusted. They were like children. God had brought them out of the wilderness. They lived in the land, and yes, they did some warfare. They cast out most of the principalities and powers, but others they left. And the Philistines are off to the west of them still. And long story short, they decide to go to war without consulting God. And so you know the story how the sons of Eli take the ark out of its place. That didn't mean the presence was with the ark. They took just the physical hub of the ark, but God didn't go with it. And he allowed that hub to go. Now, we also know the rest of the story of what happened to the Philistines, because they thought even to hold that physical, natural treasure of God, it was pretty intense. They were pretty miserable. And they and their cattle were all barren. The whole land was languishing. They were the leaders were all miserable. God brought, emerods on them. They couldn't sit down. They couldn't stand up. They couldn't lay down. They were just pretty miserable. So they decided to send it back. And so the ark comes back into the land, but then no one really knows what to do with it. And so it's kept at Abinadab's house for a while, and they think to move it by the cart. David says, it's time to move it in, and they actually thought that they would take this holy thing and put it on a physical cart and carry it, because God had already given them the design of how to carry that thing, how to move it. It's supposed to be on the priest's shoulders. I believe there are way too many leaders still trying to have a move of God without proper order on people's shoulders, and without even the presence of God with that ark to make sure that everyone's safe. It isn't just the angelic host, you guys. It's the very presence of God that allows human beings to touch even the natural things of God. So here we are as a ministry. This was just striking me so much yesterday. And they tried to take it in, and you know what happened. Uzzah and Ahio, they're on the cart, driving the cart, meaning, they're in charge of the horses, or it was oxen that were actually pulling it, weren't they? They're in charge of them, and the ark begins to slip, and Uzzah puts out his hand to just steady it, and he dies from it. And so then they take the ark off of the cart, and they leave it at Obed-Edom's house. He was a Gittite, meaning he's a person of Gath that is actually a friend of David's. You can follow his story. So here's a man that is not even of the Hebrew lineage, but he is willing to have this thing housed at his home. And what happens? But the whole house is prospering. And so David says, oh my, we got to go get this thing. And this time they go with that proper order. And what is it? I'm in 2 Samuel 6, chapter 12. So King David went and brought up the ark from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. Here it is, you guys. We have this burden of the Lord on us. Are we moving the ark with joy and gladness? Because we know. Why do you bring it with gladness? Gladness is the manifestation of the joy that just touches everybody. Look at what happened at Obed-Edom's house. Are people of the world being blessed by you carrying the ark of the Lord in your heart? Do they know a gladness whenever you come around? That's just a living sign on all of us that we are carrying the ark of the Lord in our heart. And verse 13, and when they had bare the ark of the Lord and gone 6 paces, To me, that's Monday through Saturday. I'm just having fun with God here. You go 6 days, and then you come to that day of rest, that day of, I'm just talking in the natural, okay? King David sacrificed oxen and fatlings. Fatlings are the grown rams that they released. The oxen representing the kings, the fatlings representing the priests. Because of those sacrifices, every 6 paces, you guys, they would sacrifice again and again and again. Well, look what happens then. They, with each of the sacrifices, greater and greater freedom. With the closer the ark gets into the city of David, into the city, greater and greater excitement is building. The closer it comes to the place where it will rest and where God will dwell in their midst. And David danced before the Lord with all of his might. And David girded with a linen ephod. There is that thing where our brilliance is being shown. Because all of the bruising, all of the red, all of the robes that represented the bruising and the sacrifice of Christ are taken off, and the robes of white linen are put on. The ephod representing that, where God is speaking to you, and you know his will. You know his yes, and you know his no, and you know who is chosen, and all the other things that come with wearing that. And verse 15, so David and all the house of Israel, David, that apostolic being like the tractor on a semi, and the trailer then just loaded, the people all coming, carrying all of this presence, all of this praise, lifted high. They brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting. There's our kingship victory. With the sound of the trumpet, there is our priesthood, and that prophetic voice just sounding, sounding, sounding. And they set it in his place. In whose place? In God's place, where he is choosing to dwell. In the midst of the tabernacle of David, and that he had pitched for it. And David again offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Burnt offerings representing that inner righteousness, peace offerings then, that outward expression, and the rest then that everybody has because the Lord of hosts is in their midst. And 18, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And you can go on through and you can see how everybody then got to eat of all those sacrifices. It was just a great big feast. It was just a great big feast. And so then he blesses everybody, and he goes to his own household. So here they are all then dispersed to go to their own homes and speak blessing over their homes, and all the men return to their own house to bless their house. And that's when Michal, Saul's daughter, rises up against David and charges him that he lived way too transparently. He took off his outer robes, and he was just in that linen ephod, and she shamed him, or tried to bring shame on him, and tried to bring it down to an earthly seeing, a natural seeing, and he just elevates it right back up. He said, it was before the Lord. When I was singing and dancing with the people, it was before the Lord. In other words, when we are in that position, small and great alike, we are before the Lord. And that joy is so great. And that gladness being released just touches everybody and everything. So she's showing herself to be a strange woman, because at that very time and place, instead of receiving the blessing that he was bringing into his household, she chooses to curse him and his actions as king before the nation that God just blessed. And because of it, he never went into her again, and she was childless. You know, there is a place there where I just went, oh my God, this is so great that what you are opening up for us. We are restoring the priesthood. We're restoring the priesthood. We're calling the priesthood back, but look at how it touches all the kingdom when the priesthood is restored. And what is it the point that God made in the dream was there was the return of love. I had never picked up on that. When the ark returned, love returned into. That is what's the greatest thing that remains, you guys? Is 1 Corinthians 13. The greatest that remains is love. When God's presence is dwelling with us, love and blessing and joy and peace just keep pouring and pouring and pouring. And that should be an earmark on our lives as well. And that's why David's name, the beloved, we just can't get away from that. We are the beloved. We are not just sons of God, we are sons of David. And that eternal throne that he brought to the earth, that eternal place where God chooses to dwell. And he did everything he could to build a permanent house for God in the city of teaching peace. Because the blessing that comes from that is just so outstanding. So look at where we're at in this journey. God has broken the silence. God brought open at our last training the transference of this kingdom mantle that went from Elijah and Elisha into those who would invite the prophets in. And now God is saying, as we go to the park here, this is a celebration of the fatness that wherever God's chariot goes, there is just blessing poured out on everybody. Just blessing poured out. Righteousness, peace, and joy just poured out on people. A release so great that everybody has more than enough and is fully satisfied, and then can even go home and bless their own homes and their neighbors around them. Is that not the kingdom? Where you don't just have it just for your own house, but you're so happy about what God has done in your own life that you're spilling out on your neighbors. You just can't keep it to yourself anymore. It's just splashing everywhere. That oil of God's presence is just splashing everywhere. And the healing that comes, therefore, the shadow that we carry of God's presence, like Peter, it's just bringing healing just by that very presence. And so much more. Witty inventions and all the other things, just making life go so much better for everybody.